I'm sorry I can't be with you this evening, but I'm meeting with the leader of the C40, the group I set up of big world cities to actually combat climate change, and it's making great progress. However, I'm completely with you in spirit. I feel transformed like you do with the election of Jeremy Corbyn. All I've seen is Labour leaders who failed to deliver when in government, or failed to actually defeat the Tories because they compromised too much. I've been all my life active in the political area, always challenging the right, and always confident that one day we would win, we would succeed. And these disappointments, the failure of the Blair government, the wars, did so much to demoralise the Labour Party. And it isn't just here in Britain. The same thing is happening in America with support for Bernie Sanders, across Europe. And I think all over the world, people feel an anger that they've been ignored and neglected. All the wealth is going to a small elite of bankers and financiers. And what we've got to do is change that world, and we can. And the election of Jeremy Corbyn just was such a devastating blow to all those people who've told us, oh, you've got to go to the centre, you can't be too radical. We didn't lose the election this May because we're too left-wing. We went into that election with a policy broadly mimicking the Tories. We were dismissed as austerity light. Jeremy transformed the election of the Labour leadership campaign by showing there is an alternative. There's one simple fact. Britain is the 6th richest nation in the world. There is no reason why we have to leave millions of our people and our families in poverty. We can actually change everything. It just requires a fairer system. And Jeremy has got the economic strategy, and John McDonnell as well, who was chair of my finance committee when I was at the GLC. What we've got to challenge is the simple dishonesty of the tax system. And one of the reasons the press do everything to try and discredit Jeremy Corbyn, as they did me when I became leader of the GLC back in 1981, is that they fear someone who will challenge their greed. We've got 3/4 of our newspapers owned by 5 billionaires, Rupert Murdoch, the Barclay brothers, and Lord Rothermere, and of course that nice man who runs the Daily Express. They're all funneling their profits offshore. They don't pay tax here. The last thing they want is a Labour government that's going to end the tax evasion and the tax avoidance. And John McDonnell spoke very strongly about that on my radio programme last week, on Saturday actually. We've got the worst tax avoidance there's ever been in our history. Some of the greatest corporations like Google and Starbucks paying not a penny of tax. And we can change that. All it requires is political will to do it. Then there's the question of, with all this big debt we've got after the banking crisis, how can we modernise Britain? Why can't we have a really good public transport system that's efficient? Why can't we have a broadband system that's as rapid as you see in places like Taiwan or Hong Kong? It's because our private firms aren't investing enough and the government doesn't invest enough. How do you pay for it? And Jeremy Corbyn's quantitative easing for people's projects is crucial. We've had £375 billion of new money created by the Bank of England since the banking crisis to prop up the banking system. It's done no damage to our economy. It hasn't fueled inflation. So if we can create new money to save the banks, let's create that money to have a proper public transport system, a good broadband, and start building homes for rent. I find the biggest appalling scandal of my life has been the fact that Mrs. Thatcher stopped building council housing, shamefully Blair carried on not building. Now we've got a huge crisis. If we'd carried on building council housing, even at half the rate we used to, we'd have 3.5 million more homes in this country. People wouldn't be paying £500 a week for rent on a 4-bedroom property or something like that. So the other big thing, if we start building homes, it creates at least 1 million new jobs. Those people coming off benefit, paying their tax, that's how you bring down the scale of our deficit. So let's lack the confidence. We can change Britain. And let's not allow the Tory press and people like Osborne and Cameron to divert us from those issues. The smears against Jeremy Corbyn have been outrageous, but I tell you, I've been through all of that. When I became the leader of the GLC, I was depicted as an IRA supporting terrorist, a threat to British security because I was pro-Soviet Union, a threat to our way of life. The day we cut the fares, and John McDonnell was on that council with me when we did it, the Daily Mail headline was, "This is the first step towards a full communist society." Well, I didn't think we went terribly far in that direction. And so there'll be more of these smears, but we just need to focus on explaining to people there is an economic alternative. And one of the problems in that election was poor old Ed Miliband, held back by so many of the old Blairite MPs, didn't have the confidence to challenge austerity and point out different ways of doing these things. So let's not repeat that mistake. I end on one point. When I left school in 1962, an ordinary school in Brixton, just a comprehensive, every boy in that school got a job. And a few years later, that job paid them enough to keep a family. That world's been wiped out during the Thatcher-Blair years. Loads more jobs for bankers, but 6 million jobs lost in manufacturing. I grew up in a world where things always got better. This last 35 years since Thatcher got elected, more and more people have been squeezed into unemployment or into incredibly low-paid, low-skill jobs, 0 hours contracts and all of that. If you now look, even the International Monetary Fund, one of the most strong capitalist organisations, says that if we didn't have this increasing inequality, the British economy would have grown a fifth larger than it currently is. Inequality and poverty hold us back. We have the confidence to change that. We have a leader with the courage to stand up and do it. If you want your kids to have a good opportunity in the future, get involved in East End Momentum. It's not just enough to have supported Jeremy and voted for him. We've got to build a machine that can elect a Labour government, led by Jeremy Corbyn, that will change Britain for the better. Get involved in the campaigns against bad landlords. Get involved in the campaign to stop this government keeping poor people off the voters list. And open the way to a government that for the first time in 70 years will do things for ordinary people in this country, not a small rich elite. Have a good evening.